Imagine a cold night in Chicago, a struggling man with nowhere to turn, and a young stranger who chooses to stop and listen instead of walking away. What happens next sparks a movement, reunites a broken family, and inspires thousands. This is a powerful and heartwarming story that proves one small act of kindness can change everything. The wind cut through the streets of Chicago, sharp and unforgiving as the city moved at its usual hurried pace. Pedestrians, wrapped in thick coats and scarves, rushed across intersections, their faces turned down against the cold. Cars honked impatiently, their headlights reflecting off the damp pavement. Outside a small bookstore cafe on Michigan Avenue, the scent of fresh coffee drifted into the air, offering warmth to those inside. But just outside its doors, huddled near the entrance, a man sat with his back against the brick wall, a worn-out blanket draped over his shoulders. His name was Victor, though few cared to ask. At 52 years old, he had seen better days, but those days felt like another lifetime. A former firefighter, he had once been the one people counted on in emergencies, but life had turned on him in ways he never expected. An injury forced him out of the job, medical bills piled up, and with nowhere left to go, the streets became his home. A cardboard sign rested against his knees with a simple plea: just a little kindness can go a long way. Inside the cafe, Barron stood near the counter, his hands tucked into the pockets of his sleek winter jacket. At 18 years old, he was used to attention, but today he was just another customer waiting for his drink. He glanced down at his phone, scrolling absently. Victor shivered as he watched the crowd pass. High heels, sneakers, polished leather shoes. None of them stopped, but then a pair of pristine white sneakers paused just a few feet away from him. He looked up, meeting the eyes of the young man standing there. Neither of them knew it yet, but this moment was about to change everything. Victor hesitated before speaking, his voice dry from the cold. "Hey, young man, can you spare $1?" His request was simple, no different from the dozens of times he had asked before, expecting the same outcome: a quick shake of the head, an averted gaze, or complete indifference. But this time, something different happened. Barron paused mid-scroll on his phone, his expression unreadable. Instead of walking past, he turned to face Victor, his sharp blue eyes locking onto the older man's weathered face. The pause stretched for an uncomfortable moment before Barron finally spoke. "What do you need it for?" His tone wasn't dismissive or mocking, but genuinely curious. Victor blinked, caught off guard. People didn't usually ask. They either gave or ignored him. He shifted slightly on the sidewalk. "A cup of coffee? Maybe something to eat?" he admitted. He rubbed his gloved hands together, trying to shake off the bitter chill. Barron didn't move right away. Instead, he studied Victor, as if trying to see beyond the surface. Around them, people walked past, some whispering, others pulling out their phones, sensing that this was not a typical exchange. The air between them felt charged, as if something unexpected was about to unfold. Victor exhaled, his breath visible in the freezing air. He wasn't used to people asking about his life. Most just walked by, offering either pity or judgment. But something about Barron's gaze, steady and expectant, made him feel like this kid actually wanted to know. He shifted against the wall, adjusting the worn blanket around his shoulders. "I wasn't always like this," he said, his voice rough but steady. He hesitated, debating whether to open up. But for the first time in a long time, someone was listening. "I was a firefighter," Victor finally admitted, looking down at his hands, fingers stiff from the cold. 15 years on the job. I lived for it, saving people, pulling folks out of burning buildings. It gave me purpose." A small bitter chuckle escaped his lips. "Funny, huh? I used to save lives, and now I can't even save my own." Barron's expression didn't change, but his posture shifted slightly, a sign that he was absorbing every word. Victor took a deep breath. "Then, one day, everything changed. A building collapsed on me during a rescue. I was lucky to survive, but my back was messed up. Bad. Doctors told me I couldn't do the job anymore." He clenched his jaw. "I fought it, tried rehab, tried to push through the pain, but I couldn't keep up." His voice dropped lower, thick with regret. No job meant no paycheck. Medical bills piled up, savings ran out, I lost my apartment, then my truck, then everything else. I tried working odd jobs, but no one wants to hire a liability. He let out a shaky breath. And here I am. The words hung in the air between them, heavy and unspoken. Around them, people continued walking, unaware that a man was laying out the broken pieces of his life on a frozen sidewalk. Barron remained quiet for a moment before finally speaking. No family? Victor swallowed hard, looking away. Not anymore. My wife left when things got bad. Can't blame her, I guess. We had different ways of handling loss. He shook his head. And my brother? We haven't talked in years. For a long moment, Barron didn't respond. He simply stood there, absorbing every word. Then, slowly, he reached into his pocket. Barron reached into his pocket, his fingers brushing against the bills inside. Victor expected him to pull out a few crumpled ones, maybe a 5 if he was lucky. But when Barron's hand emerged, he was holding a crisp $100 bill. Victor's breath caught in his throat. He had asked for $1, nothing more. This was something else entirely. Barron extended the bill, but before Victor could take it, he spoke. "This isn't just for coffee," he said, his voice steady. "But if I give this to you, you have to promise me something." Victor hesitated, eyes flicking between Barron's face and the money. What kind of promise? Barron crouched down to meet him at eye level, a move that unsettled Victor more than the money itself. Most people looked down at him. This kid was looking straight at him. "There's a shelter and resource center a few blocks from here," Barron said, his tone even but firm. "They can help you, not just with a warm bed, but with job programs, counseling, whatever you need." Victor swallowed hard, the weight of Barron's words sinking in. He had heard about places like that before, but asking for help was harder than people realized. "I don't know," Victor muttered, rubbing his hands together. "Places like that, they make you feel like you're nothing, like you've already failed." Barron didn't look away. "You haven't failed. You just haven't had the right opportunity to get back up." Victor's chest tightened. He wanted to believe that, but years of disappointment had hardened him. Still, there was something different about this moment, about this kid. Barron tore a piece of paper from a small notepad, scribbled something, and handed it to Victor along with the bill. "Go there tomorrow," he said. "I'll make sure they're expecting you." Victor's fingers trembled as he took the money and the note. He didn't know why he trusted Barron's words, but for the first time in years, he felt something that had long been missing. Hope. Barron stood up, glancing around at the growing crowd, his expression unreadable. "Do we have a deal?" Victor looked at the note again, then back at Barron, and against everything he had trained himself to believe, he nodded. As Victor clutched the crisp bill and the note in his trembling hands, the world around them shifted in ways neither of them could have anticipated. Unbeknownst to them, several bystanders had been quietly recording the entire exchange on their phones. The unusual sight of a teenage heir to a powerful family kneeling on the frozen sidewalk, having a heartfelt conversation with a homeless man, had drawn attention. Within hours, the videos began circulating online, spreading like wildfire. By the next morning, social media was flooded with clips of the encounter. Some praised Barron for his kindness, calling it a rare and genuine act of compassion, while others debated whether it was a publicity stunt or an authentic moment of human connection. Hashtags like Barron Effect and Kindness Challenge began trending. News outlets picked up the story, and soon, commentators were discussing it on national television. Meanwhile, Victor was completely unaware of the media storm brewing around him. He sat in a diner with the first hot meal he had eaten in days, staring at the address Barron had given him. He had promised to go, but the fear of failure gnawed at him. What if this was just another false hope? As the world debated the meaning of Barron's gesture, Victor was left with a choice: to take a step toward rebuilding his life or to stay in the shadows of the past. Little did he know, his next decision wouldn't just change his own fate, it would become the heart of a movement that would inspire thousands. Victor stood outside the Hope Haven Resource Center, gripping the small crumpled note in his hand. His breath formed clouds in the cold air as he stared at the entrance, his feet frozen in place. He had promised to come, but promises were easier to make than to keep. His mind raced with doubts. What if they turned him away? What if this was just another dead end? Years of hardship had taught him that hope was a dangerous thing. But then he remembered Barron's words. "You haven't failed. You just haven't had the right opportunity to get back up." Taking a deep breath, Victor forced himself to step inside. The warmth of the building immediately wrapped around him, a stark contrast to the bitter wind outside. A receptionist, a kind-looking woman in her 50s, glanced up from her desk. "Can I help you?" she asked with a welcoming smile. Victor hesitated, then slowly placed the note on the counter. "Barron sent me." The woman's eyes flicked to the paper, then back up to Victor. Recognition dawned on her face. "Ah," she said, nodding. "We've been expecting you." Before Victor could react, she waved over a caseworker, a tall man with an easygoing demeanor. "Come on, let's get you settled," he said. The next few hours passed in a blur. Victor was given a warm meal, fresh clothes, and a chance to shower. Then, he sat with the caseworker who listened to his story without judgment. For the first time in years, someone wasn't just offering him spare change, they were offering him a path forward. They discussed options: a temporary bed in the shelter, medical help for his back, and job training programs tailored to his experience. The shelter's staff treated him with dignity, as if he were more than just another statistic. As Victor sat in the common room later that evening nursing a cup of coffee, he realized something strange. He felt lighter. The weight of hopelessness, though still there, wasn't quite as crushing. Meanwhile, across the city, Barron checked his phone for an update from the shelter. When he saw the message confirming Victor had arrived, a small, satisfied smile crossed his face. He had kept his promise. Now, it was up to Victor to do the same. As Victor took his first steps toward rebuilding his life, the world outside was already reacting to his story in ways neither he nor Barron could have imagined. The viral video of their encounter had sparked something far greater than a fleeting moment of online attention. It had ignited a movement. Across social media, people were inspired by Barron's unexpected kindness. Posts flooded in under the hashtags Barron Effect and Kindness Challenge, with strangers sharing their own small acts of generosity. Some left hot meals for the homeless in their cities, others donated to shelters, and many stepped out of their comfort zones to simply listen to those society often ignored. Shelters across the country reported an increase in volunteers and donations, with many specifically mentioning Barron's video as their motivation. The resource center Victor had visited saw a surge of support, allowing them to expand their outreach programs. Meanwhile, Barron remained silent amid the growing media frenzy. He refused interviews, ignored the cameras chasing him, and continued about his life as usual. For him, this wasn't about publicity, it was about making a real difference. But for Victor, the ripple effect became personal in a way he never expected. Someone from his past had seen the video, and they were coming to find him. Victor sat in the common room of the shelter, stirring a cup of coffee absent-mindedly, lost in thought. The past few days had been overwhelming. A warm bed, regular meals, and people who actually cared about his future. It was more than he had dared to hope for in years, but even as he felt a fragile sense of stability returning, a part of him remained cautious, waiting for the rug to be pulled out from under him again. Then the door to the shelter opened, and a man walked in, his gaze scanning the room as if searching for someone. Victor barely noticed at first, too caught up in his own thoughts, until the man hesitated near the front desk and spoke to one of the staff. Then, he heard his name. "Victor." The voice was familiar but impossible. Victor's body tensed as he turned slowly, his eyes landing on a face he hadn't seen in over a decade. His younger brother, the one he had lost touch with after years of distance and mistakes. David, who had once looked up to him, now stood before him, older, different, but still unmistakably family. Victor's throat tightened. "David?" His voice cracked, barely above a whisper. David took a hesitant step forward. "I saw the video. I couldn't believe it was you." He exhaled sharply, as if gathering the courage to say the words he had been holding in. I should have looked for you sooner." Victor felt a mix of emotions he couldn't even name: shock, shame, hope. He had convinced himself long ago that David had moved on, that he had been forgotten. But here he was. "I didn't exactly make it easy to find me," Victor admitted, rubbing the back of his neck. David let out a small, shaky chuckle. "No, you didn't. But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." The weight of those words hit Victor harder than he expected. For years he had been alone, believing there was no one left who cared. But now, as David stepped closer, reaching out a hand, not out of pity, but out of brotherhood, Victor realized something. He wasn't alone anymore. A few weeks had passed since Victor first walked through the shelter doors, and his life had already begun to change in ways he never thought possible. With the help of the resource center, he had secured a temporary job at a local fire station. Not as a firefighter, but in community outreach, helping train young recruits and educating the public on fire safety. It wasn't the same as running into burning buildings, but it gave him a renewed sense of purpose. For the first time in years, he felt like he belonged somewhere again. His relationship with David had also begun to heal. The two spent time catching up, filling in the gaps of the years they had lost. David had a family now, a wife and 2 kids, who had been eager to meet their long-lost uncle. The first time Victor sat at their dinner table, a plate of hot food in front of him, he had to fight back tears. He had forgotten what it felt like to be part of a family. Meanwhile, the ripple effect of Barron's kindness continued to spread far beyond Chicago. The viral video had inspired thousands to take action, and shelters across the country reported an increase in donations and volunteers. Barron, despite the media's relentless attempts to get a statement from him, continued to remain silent. He wasn't interested in the attention. He had never done it for that. One evening, as Victor walked through the city, he spotted another man sitting on the sidewalk, wrapped in a thin blanket, shivering against the cold. For a brief moment, he saw himself. Without hesitation, he stepped forward. "Hey," Victor said, crouching down, "can I get you something to eat?" Because sometimes, all it takes is one small act of kindness to change everything. The story of Barron, Trump, and Victor teaches a profound lesson about the power of kindness, the impact of second chances, and the ripple effect of compassion. Barron could have ignored Victor's request, like so many others had, but instead he chose to listen, to see him as a person, and to extend a hand beyond just temporary relief. His simple act of generosity wasn't just about money, it was about believing in someone who had lost faith in himself. Victor's journey reminds us that hardship can happen to anyone, and often, those struggling the most were once people who helped others. His fall from being a firefighter to homelessness shows how quickly life can change, but his willingness to accept help and try again proves that it's never too late to rebuild. Beyond their individual actions, the story highlights how one act of kindness can inspire countless others. The viral moment didn't just change Victor's life, it started a movement, proving that compassion is contagious. It challenges us to look beyond appearances, to stop and listen, and to remember that sometimes all someone needs is a chance to stand back up. Small actions can create life-changing ripples, if we choose to take them.